Good morning again, good afternoon. I am Pascal Chariot, I'm the CEO of Enerdata, and I would like to welcome you in this webinar that I will just introduce before giving the floor to Florent and Paco. This webinar will be focused on forecasting energy consumption and with a specific case study at Enerdata. We have been developing an expertise around energy demand analysis and forecasting for many years. So we are very happy to share this with you and to share some recent development we have made, namely with the development of our new energy demand bottom-up model, which Florent will introduce to you, which is called EnerMed, which is already I even don't know the number in the series of the Mayday models. We have not made the inventory, but it has been a long history of bottom-up modeling exercises and improvements. So we are very happy to share this with you today with some concrete examples and analysis. This slide just shows our experience. We celebrate our 30 years anniversary this year. We are today in Grenoble. You can see the picture in the French Alps. Nevertheless, we work with many countries around the world on these topics, typically like energy demand. And I'm very happy that we focus on energy demand. I'm just coming back from the COP. I was a bit surprised that most of the discussions still are very focused on energy supply, all the new vectors, clean technologies, etc., which is nice. But I'm personally convinced that there is still a lot to be done in terms of mastering energy demand, both through energy efficiency and energy sufficiency measures and policies. And that's why we are very keen at supporting you in your efforts in that respect for the future. So enjoy this webinar, and I leave the floor to Florent and Paco. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. Hi everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I'm Florent Gauthier. I'm project manager at Enerdata, and I will speak with my colleague Paco Bailly, who is an analyst at Enerdata. So today we'll talk to you about forecasting the energy demand at countries level, and we will see how to use it to evaluate a regulation change. Our presentation is divided into three parts. First, we will see our tools, the EnerMed model, as Pascal said, and the country energy demand forecast. And then we will dive into the transport sector, seeing the main levers of modelation that we are looking for in the national strategies to model this sector. And finally, we will show you how we model the specific new targets taken from the Fitfor55 legislative package. The one in particular that all new passenger car will be zero emission by 2035. We'll present you the interesting results regarding the impact on our scenarios. Just to say that you can ask any question you have by using the Q&A chat box on the interface, and we will answer all these questions at the end of the webinar. Let's start with the first step. We obviously need a country scenario before assessing the impact of a public regulation. So in our team specialized in energy efficiency and demand, we mainly use a techno-economic model, known also as a bottom-up model, to produce country simulations. This model is called EnerMed, and the different stakeholders we worked with are interesting in this kind of model because for three main purposes. The first one is the energy demand at long-term horizon, like 2050 at least. With EnerMed, we will see later hundreds of thousands of inputs depending the required details and get simulations. Second point, we can assess public policies based on the calculated energy consumption. And this is basically what we will talk about to you today at country scale. But just to say that we can use it also, we can use the model also for at the scale of the cities, as we do currently with the metropolis of Grenoble. The third point is that we can get GHG emission trajectories for each scenarios and work with the stakeholders on their strategies to reduce these emissions. So it's quite a good tool to develop NDCs, for example. How ENAMED, how does it work? It's a bottom-up model, as I said, and this kind of model are very robust to capture technological progress and lifestyle changes. The users can load many inputs like socioeconomic variables, for instance, GDP, population, added value, and so on, and technological characterization, such as the number of vehicles, the building stock, and the efficiencies, the performances. And all of this input can be disaggregated by branch, by end use, by vehicle, etc. So that makes that we can have between hundreds and thousands of variables in ENAMED. We get as output, of course, the energy demand by sector, by subsector, and by end uses, but we can also get all the intermediate calculations. I mean, for example, the specific consumption by end use, by vehicle type. We can have all the socioeconomic intermediate calculations, and all the main indicators like the energy intensity and the CO2 emissions. The plus of our model is that Enadata put all the equation in the model, so that's our added value, and that every users can change it. Of course, it's flexible. For those who are not modelers, we have created a specific product called Country Energy Demand Forecast. In Enadata, we have modelized 5 European countries: UK, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, using the historical data from the Odyssey database and putting more than 200 inputs that we took from national and sectoral public strategies. So based on this, we built 2 scenarios: a reference scenario and an energy efficiency scenario. So this kind of tool is quite, it's ready to use by non-experts. It's quite has a user-friendly interface. How do we build our 2 scenarios? For the reference scenario, we take, for the reference and the energy efficiency scenarios, we take the same macroeconomic assumptions, as there is, we take into consideration the COVID effect, but there is a catch-up of the pre-COVID trends after 2025. We take the GDP projections from the national strategies. That's to be noticed that it's always grows until 2050. Then for the reference scenario, we use the existing measures and the existing targets that we take from the NACP, with mainly the target of 2030. And for the energy efficiency scenario, we take the targets in national long-term strategies for the year, usually for the year 2050. And yeah, in the reference scenario, we get continuous but limited improvement, driven mainly by technological progress. And in the energy efficiency scenario, we put more electrification. For example, in industry, in buildings, we have better renovation rates in residential, in services, and a greater modal transfer, greater improvements in energy performance of road vehicles. All of this information, as I mentioned, are taken from long-term national strategies, as it is written on the bottom. It's the example for UK, Spain, France, Italy, and Germany. Here you can find an example of the data you can download from Country Energy Demand Forecast. This is the example of France. On the left graphs, you have the two scenarios, reference and energy efficiency. The reference scenario shows a decrease until 2030, and then the global energy demand remains stable. You can see the shares of each sectors in this demand. And in the energy efficiency scenarios, there is a decrease, a continuous decrease until 2050, and the sector with the fastest decrease is the transport sector. That decreases by 10 point of percentages between today and 2050. On the right side, we can see the energy savings, so the difference between the two scenarios. And the transport energy consumptions that we can display also. As you can see, we took the COVID impact for the previous year, and it's disaggregated by mode, so road, passenger, rail, air. To finish with the country energy demand forecast, in this tool we offer 10 sensitivity analysis ready to use. For example, if the user push the button macroeconomy on the right or on the left, it will get an increase or a decrease of the related assumptions. For example, if you push on the right the macroeconomic button, you will have more percentage of increase of the GDP growth, more of the renovation rate of building in both residential and service, and more passenger and good traffic. As you can see on the graph, you can display the sensitivity analysis to catch the savings compared to, in this case, it's the energy efficiency scenario. So now let's focus on the transport sector, which is directly concerned by the future regulation change of the Fit455 package. Sorry. In the national strategies, are driven by decarbonization plans, and for the transport sector, we take the main levers of decarbonization to put in our models. These 5 points are the following. The first one is the transport demand. We look at the amount of kilometer per person for the passenger and the tons kilometer for freight. We look what is this transport demand. The second point, the second driver, is the modal shift. How the transport demand can shift for passengers from cars to public modes and from trucks to rail for the freight. The third point is how many people and how many tons are carried by these vehicles. The fourth point is the energy efficiency. How much energy does a vehicle need to run this kilometer, this 100 kilometers, for example? And the fifth point is the fuel substitution. Then at the end, which fuel will be used to cover this energy? So the floor is yours, Paco.
Thank you, Florent. So I will present the assumptions that we use for France, Germany, and Spain scenarios. To do this, I will come back on the 5 levers that you presented in the previous slide. So here on this slide, you have on the left of the slide the evolution of the demand per passenger for mobility for Germany, France, and Spain for the 2 scenarios, efficiency and reference scenario. We can see that in these 3 countries, we have an increase of the mobility, the passenger traffic. This is due to an increase of mobility per capita, which is in line with the increase of the GDP per capita that we modeled in our scenarios. We can see also that in Germany, the passenger demand, flattens a bit, is because of the reduction of the population due to the decrease, the reduction of the population linked to a low fertility in this country. On the right of the slide, you have on the right of the slide, you have the share in the different type of transportation, so aviation, rail, and road transportation. For the efficiency scenario, we can see that for our three countries, the road transportation will increase until 2050, especially in Spain, where we go from 7% to 15% in 2050. We can also see that the main share is still the road transportation, even with a large increase of the road transportation in our scenario. So we'll focus on this topic for the next slides. Thank you. So I will talk about the load factor and the efficiency, energy efficiency in this slide. So as Florence said, the load factor is the average number of people or the average quantity of goods that you can transport in a vehicle. This parameter allows us to consider an increase in carpooling, for example, or a better optimization of space in freight transport, which is in line with current trends. In our scenarios, and according to what we found in national strategy, we increase the load factor between 0 and 15% according to the countries. Concerning energy efficiency, in the NRMED model, we model the evolution of the energy consumption, assuming the consumption of new cars on the market. The first target we use in our model was designed to be in line with the EU regulation of 60 grams of CO2 per kilometer in 2030. And for 2050, we decided to use a target for the new vehicle of 2 liters per 100 kilometers for internal combustion engines cars. And for electrical car, will go from 18 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers to 12 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers in 2050. This assumption is quite strong because we are quite far from the current consumption of the car. Is because we assume that the cars that will be sold in 2050 will be lighter and smaller than the current cars of today. It's a kind of a strong assumption because we can see in the last trend that is not really the path we take. In this slide, I will talk about the fuel substitution and more precisely about the evolution of the cell for the cars. So here we displayed the type of vehicle, the type of motorization, the type of engine that we have in the cells between 2000 and 2050 for the 3 countries in the efficiency scenario. What we can see is that we took different targets of the end of thermal cars for the 3 scenario. In France, we took the target of 2040 for the end of internal combustion engine. And in Spain and Germany, it was we took the target of 2045. We took the target of 2040 in France is because there was already a law when we did our scenarios that plan to ban the internal combustion engine by 2040 in France. We also use intermediary targets in 2030, for example, in the France national strategy, we know that they plan to sell about 35% of electric cars in 2035, and in Spain, they mentioned that there will be 3 million of electrical cars in 2030 in the stock. So I will present now the result of our efficiency scenarios. And here in this slide, yes, thank you. In this slide, at the upper part of the slide, we display the vehicle stock of the 3 scenarios. In NRMED, we model the evolution of the vehicle stock with a death curve and an average lifetime for each type of vehicle. In these scenarios, we assumed that the lifetime is a bit reduced for the internal combustion engine because that we think that climate policy will increase the rate of dispersion, the rate of disappearance of this car. So we can see that in France, in 2050, around 1% of the stock is still internal combustion engine, but in Spain and Germany, it's more about 5% for both. On the chart on the left, on the bottom left of the slide, you can see the evolution of the unit consumption of cars, of the stock of cars in France, Spain, and Germany. What we can see is that there is a strong decrease, and as much as there is electrical car inside the stock, the unit consumption of the stock of car will go to the unit consumption of the electrical cars. In France, we have a 75% of decrease in the unit consumption of the stock of car between 2015 and 2050. On the right of the slide, you have the energy consumption. You have the energy consumption of the cars, the total energy consumption of the cars. We can see that in France, there is almost no more oil in the consumption, but in Spain and in Germany, there is still a bit. It's around 10% to compare to the 5% that the car represented in the stock. So it's much, the share is more important in the energy consumption than in the car stock. I think if you, Florent, you want to present the new measure from Fitfor55.
Thanks, Paco. Let's dive now into the Fitfor55 package. So after the European election of 2019, the European Commission presidency submitted a political framework, which is called the European Green Deal. In this text sets the reduction by at least 55% by 2030 of net greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 level, and net zero emission by 2050. The goals have been approved by the European Parliament and the European Council by December 2020, and then it has been put into law in June 2021. So we came from the political framework to the law, which entered into force by June 2021. So Fitfor55 is the legislative package, the legislative roadmap, listing all the regulation changes that will be done, or all the revision that will be done to reach the new targets. There are several points, but one is very interesting for us today. It's the revision of the regulation setting the CO2 emissions performance standards for cars and vans. The idea is to put better, to set better targets compared to the 2021 previous target in the related regulation. So now the targets say from the 1st January 2030, there will be a reduction of 55% of emissions for cars and 50% for vans. And in the year 2035, we will get 100% of reduction for both cars and vans. So we say, yes, we will model this new target in our energy efficiency scenarios, and we will see the impact on the energy consumption. For us, this means that it will be a full electrical vehicle share from this year. I'll let you back.
Yes, thank you, Florent. So yeah, can you move to the next slide? Okay. So in this slide, you have in the upper part the efficiency scenarios that we already talked about for the Germany, and at the bottom part of it, you have the efficiency scenario with this new target set by the Fitfor55 package. So you can see that in on the left of the slide, you have the sales. And you can see that there is a difference between the year to ban the internal combustion cars. So in the efficiency scenario, it was 2045, and in the Fitfor55 scenario, it's more about 2035. It's 2035. So on the middle of the slide, you have the the stock of the car, so the evolution of the stock of the car. And what we can see is that if in the efficiency scenario, there still be around 10% of the internal combustion engine in the stock, in the new Fit for55 scenario, there is almost no new internal combustion engine, no internal combustion engine after 2045. Of course, it has also an important effect on the share of energy used to power cars. Indeed, the electricity is more important in this new scenario than it was in the previous one after 2035. But in terms of total consumption in 2050, the difference is not so important. Indeed, we can really see the difference in 2050 in terms of energy consumption. We'll try to investigate that in the next slide. Yes, so thank you. So here on the upper part of the slide, on the left part of the slide, you have the evolution of the unit consumption of diesel and electric vehicles between 2010 and 2050. What we can see is that there is a real difference between the average consumption of internal combustion car and electric car. The unit consumption of electric car is about one-third lower than one-third, of the internal combustion cars. On the right of the slide, you have also the evolution of the unit consumption of the total stock of the car. What we can see is that there is no much difference in 2050, and the difference is more between 2035 and 2045. We displayed this saving in the chart on the bottom part, on the left bottom part of the slide. In orange, you have the evolution of the saving for Germany compared to the savings due to these Fit for55 measures. So we can see that the maximum savings are around 2039 for a total amounts to 2.2 megaton of oil equivalent. We also displayed in blue the savings in France. What we can see is that this a bit shifted before. The maximum saving is more around 2036, and it's only a saving of 1.2 megaton oil equivalent, or 13% of the total energy consumption of cars. In the table on the right of the slide, you have the maximal saving and the year associated to this maximal saving due to this new measure of Fit for55, and the total energy saving, the share of the total energy saving in 2050. So we can see that in France there is not much difference, but there is still a small difference in Spain and Germany, and the maximum saving for Spain and Germany are around 20%. But in France, it's more about around 13%, because in our scenario, we had already a ban of electrical car in 2040 in France compared to 2045 in Spain and Germany. For the last slide of this webinar, we decided to do another scenario, because as we said in the beginning of this webinar, is that we took very strong hypotheses on the evolution of the unit consumption of car, because we assumed that the weight of car would decrease until 2050. So here we decided to decrease the energy efficiency of the cars by 30% compared to our efficiency scenario, to see the effect of it on our scenarios. You can see on the right part of the slide, upper right part of the slide, the new evolution of the stock of the car. We can see that it will decrease more in line with the current trends of the current unit consumption of diesel cars. We only displayed here Germany, the German scenario. In terms of total unit consumption of car, what we can see on the bottom left part of the slide is that we can see that in 2050 is not so much, the difference between the two scenarios is not really important, because finally, even if we increase a bit the unit consumption of the electrical vehicle, is still way more efficient than the internal combustion vehicles. So the difference compared to what is the consumption, the current consumption, is not really important in 2050. We still have the difference of the consumption between 2035 and 2045, and it's more important that in previous scenario without this decrease of efficiency. We can compare the savings that we have for the two scenarios in this curve on the right of the slide, and we can see that in Germany we move from 2.2 MTOE maximal savings to around 3.4 maximal savings, always around 2039. So yeah, I think I will let Florent conclude this webinar.
Thank you, Paco. Yes. What are the conclusions? First, we can say that we can use our model ENERMET to assess the impact of an energy regulation change, and specifically for Fitfor55, what are the conclusions of the end of new thermal car sales by 2035? We observe first a low reduction in energy consumption by 2050, but it's compared to the national long-term strategies that we have modeled previously. So the difference with the national long-term strategy is not so much, it's marginal, but there is in the transition interesting points. There is first a faster decrease in energy consumption. There is a faster increase of the electricity market share during this transition. So as we have seen that the energy efficiency efforts are driven by the switch from thermal to electric cars, this change in the regulation will enforce the scenario. It remains very challenging assumptions. That is the weight of the thermal cars, as Paco mentioned, because as we observed in the past trends, the increasing weight of thermal cars had balanced the energy efficiency efforts. That's why the switch to electric motorization will force the specific consumption of the overall stock. It will force to follow the efficiency curve of electrical cars. I will finish this presentation saying that in these transport scenarios, also long-term decarbonization issues are obviously transferred to the power generation sector. A few words to say that country energy demand forecast will be updated once the legislative package will be definitively approved. Thank you very much, Paco, and thank you for your attention. I will check if we have questions now. Don't hesitate to put in the chat box if you have questions. The first question, just to make sure I get it, bottom up is exploratoire versus top down is normative in your jargon, right?
I can answer if you want. Yeah. No, so bottom up approach is more that we will make assumption about everything. We'll have a really detailed representation of the energy demand by technologies, by technology. So we will be able to model the type of cars that we will use, the type of buses, the type of heating system, the type of air conditioning system, for example. And after we'll have to make assumption on how this technology will evolve according to our scenario. This allows us to be really detailed and to estimate how technology will, what will be the impact of a technology or a specific policy, as we shown in this webinar. A top-down approach is more a general approach that where we will modify the general assumptions for example, the GDP, the population, and price or trends on efficiency. It works with the econometrics equation, and it is more easy to use because we do not have to go deeper in all the details, but it's also less precise than what we can have with a bottom-up approach. Yeah.
If I may add something, is that in this case, the exercise for our scenarios is to take information from national long-term strategies. So these strategies make the exercise, which is often a kind of normative approach to reach a specific target of carbon, and that can be exploratory also for the pathway. In our case, we just take this information to put it in our scenarios to understand what are the national long-term strategies. We don't make the same exercise as governments do with hundreds of people. Other question that's related, what are your GDP trend hypotheses until 2050? Do we have the figures exactly? What we take in country energy demand forecast, it's the hypothesis, like I said, in the NECPs or in the national long-term strategies. So it depends in each documents. So it's all public information regarding the GDP for the 5 countries. It's quite transparent. But as I mentioned, all the GDPs are growing in the national assumptions. Do you want to add something, Paco?
Yeah, just maybe I have in mind one value for France is, I think in 2050 it's still around, is less than 2%, is more around 1.3 or 1.5% of growth per year, I think, for France, for example, and it was similar for the other countries.
Thanks. Another question, what is your assumption in terms of carbon content of French electrical mix in 2050? Do you want to take this?
Yes, so in fact, we have another product in Enadata that will use a more top-down approach, which is called Future, and as a detailed representation of the power sector. And usually for our scenario, we will use this the trajectory of this product because often it's not really precise in the national strategies, really precise. So we decided to use our other product to design that.
Thank you, Paco. Other question. What about hydrogen in transport? Did we take it into account? I can start the answer for hydrogen. We don't have it in the, as we mentioned, we show you the passenger energy consumption, and the H2 in transport will focus more on in long distance and truck transportation. Yeah.
Yeah. What we can see currently is that the electric car is really increasing in the sales. For example, we were at I think 2% in 2019, and today we are more around 30% of the sales. So we can see a huge increase in electrical cars in the sales. And what we think here and for these scenarios is that the electrical cars will take all the market soon, and there will be no more space for hydrogen cars. And so we decided to just make the hypothesis that electrical cars will be dominant in our scenarios for cars. But of course, for long distance transportation, hydrogen has advantages for trucks, or even if we want to produce synthetic fuels, it can be used to produce a synthetic fuel to replace oil or current fossil fuels.
Okay. Did you assess the emission of electrical vehicle due to the emission for electricity production in the future? Yes, we had it for the we model it through NRMed, but we don't show it in the tool country energy demand forecast. That will be the point of the upcoming updates of the next year. What we can say is that in the Fit455 package, there are also revision of the renewable energy directive, and that will impact the power generation sector also. This point of Fit455, if I answer the question, this point is not modeled yet, but that will be interesting, of course. What's the average lifespan of a vehicle in when you model your stock of vehicles? If you want.
Yeah, so usually we take an average lifetime of 12 years for cars, but as we mentioned before, as we think that climate policy will increase the rate of disappearance of internal combustion cars. For our scenario, we decided to slightly move from 12 years of average lifetime to 10 years of average lifetime to represent this higher rate of disparition in our scenarios.
Okay, I think it's time. Perhaps a few words if you want to. A few words if you ask us to how to use the NRMed model. We have three ways, as I presented. You have the possibility to access of predefined scenarios, which is in the interface country energy demand forecast. We can also make dedicated scenarios via through projects between you and us, and you can have access to a license to use the model. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paco, and thank you for your attentions. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.